Today's inductees include a famous Kentucky musician, a Pulitzer Prize-winning photojournalist, and a war hero. Beyond their professional accomplishments, each of these men has had significant impact on the life of this university as a teacher, as a mentor, and as a leader. And all three of those individuals fall into that category of what they've meant to this institution: teacher, mentor, leader. It is my privilege to recognize our newest members of the WKU Hall of Distinguished Alumni today. And Roger Casalingo, if you will join me in front of the stage for the plaque presentation as soon as each individual comes forward. We will begin with Dr. David "Doc" Livingston. Doc Livingston was a 1951 graduate who touched thousands with his gift of composing and performing and teaching amazing music. And I don't know if you picked up on it or not, but the music we enjoyed during lunch was Doc Livingston from one or more of his CDs, and of which there are many of those. But we enjoyed his music during lunch. Doc, as he is famously known, retired as a music professor and director of bands for WKU in 1990. He continued for many years to grace us with his special music and classical performances, and today we're proud to give something back to Doc and say thanks. Thanks for all the joy you have given to so many throughout your life. So if you'll please direct your attention to the video boards on either side of the room, we will honor the life and contributions of Dr. David "Doc" Livingston.
A gifted musician, composer, and teacher, known for his wry sense of humor and signature chuckle. David "Doc" Livingston is one of the most talented musicians to grace Kentucky's musical landscape. With a career spanning more than half a century, Livingston's legacy is a soulful symphony.
If every person he touched were a note or an emotion or a phrase or a melody, it would be the most amazing symphony you'd ever hear.
Born to a musical family in London, Kentucky, Livingston arranged and played music in clubs and on the radio from the age of 15. After high school, he joined the Army Infantry, but was later transferred to the 4th Air Corps Band in California to play jazz saxophone. In 1951, he received a Bachelor of Science degree from Western, his master's degree from University of Kentucky, and completed his doctoral degree at Ohio State University in 1971. He spent 18 years as a teacher and band director in Kentucky's public schools, including the honor of becoming the first band director at Franklin County High School.
He was a marvelous jazz musician. He played excellent piano. He played all the reeds, particularly clarinet, saxophone, his whole saxophone family. I remember one summer when we were teaching in the same system, he was teaching private lessons in a little temporary classroom, and I came by to see him, and he had 2 tape recorders set up. And he'd gotten out some saxophone quartet music, and he had an alto, a tenor, and a baritone sax. And he would record the first alto part, and then he would play that back and play and record on the other player the second alto part, and so forth until he had the whole quartet. The sound quality was atrocious because it was just a couple of little Webcore tape recorders. But he was doing this just to amuse himself.
I used to go to the Royal Music Band Directors Reading Session. And we always went out for a jam session with people playing to a club one night over the Saturday or Sunday, Friday, Saturday or Sunday weekend. One year, we went to a place and the piano was so old that it was a half-step flat. Dave Livingston, of course, was playing piano because nobody else would. We did all the tunes and he transposed them all 1/2 step up because the piano was a 1/2 step flat. He played them just like he's always known them, and just, he was amazing, the most talented man I ever knew.
You know what? Who is this guy? Who is this? Because my first year was 1965, and I think that was his first year. as band director at Western. And so I knew him as a band director, but that's about all. And I come to find out that Dr. Livingston had played with Louis Armstrong, that he played with Dave Brubeck. He sat down at the piano that day as Dr. David Livingston, but when he got up from the piano, he was just Doc.
A noted composer, Doc Livingston served as director of bands at WKU and taught courses in theory, composition, and woodwinds until his retirement in 1990. He completed USO tours around the world, serving with the Gemini Dance Band. A member of the Billy Vaughn Hollywood Orchestra, Doc made 2 overseas tours with the group and, over his career, performed with the likes of Louis Armstrong, Dave Brubeck, and Rosemary Clooney. He has composed scores of original music and been honored with the Governor's Award for Art in Instrumental Music, inducted into the WKU Music Hall of Fame, and the band room at Franklin County High School is named in his honor. Doc and his wife Joyce have been married for 62 years, and their musical legacy lives on in their 2 children, 3 granddaughters, and 9 great-grandchildren.
He was unique, and but you do meet people like that, and it's a very small business, we'll call it. The idea of teaching kids instrumental music at the early levels, and teaching teachers how to teach, which was his forte, based on his experience. He was unique. I can't describe it any other way. He could do it all. Marvelous composer, arranger, performer, jazz piano. I don't know about his legitimate piano playing. I don't think I ever heard him play anything legitimate, but marvelous reed player, clarinet, saxophone. Just an all-around amazing guy.
David, thanks so much for all of your input through the years, not only academically, but your friendship. And I say thank you, I say thank you, Doc.
2014 WKU Hall of Distinguished Alumni inductee, David "Doc" Livingston.
On behalf of our family and friends, we want to thank you, Dr. Ransdell, and the Alumni Committee for bestowing this great honor on our dad, father-in-law, grandfather, great-grandfather, and friend, Dr. David Livingston. I would like to introduce my table. My brother Tim, he is a WKU alum. My daughter Hannah, she's a WKU alum. Our three of our 9 grandchildren. This is Ivan, Caleb, and Grace. Music faculty at WKU, Marshall Scott, who is one of the very few that speaks my dad's language. And that means a lot. And Nancy Crone, you saw the Gemini all-girls dance band, except Larnell Harris was not a girl. But she was in one of his first Gemini groups, and it's appropriate to have her here. She's been a big part of our family story. How do you describe a man like David Livingston without mentioning music? It can't be done, but I'm going to try to give some background. That was a beautiful video. I hadn't seen that. Our dad came from parents who were educated, but they were not particularly musical. He grew up in eastern Kentucky among the coal mines. His mother was a former teacher, and his father had several careers: railroad engineer for L&N Railroad, a Methodist minister, and mayor of a small town in Harlan County, Kentucky. The fact that our dad's a musical genius is a gift from God. He grew up during the Great Depression and was not provided with all the musical opportunities that people have today. He grew up listening to recordings of Benny Goodman, and he memorized them. He memorized everything that Benny Goodman had ever recorded, and that's not an exaggeration. He played all of them on clarinet. There was a piano in their home, and he was self-taught. That's why he never knew any classical music. He taught himself, but he did a pretty good job. His high school band director, Reed Hoskins, drove him all the way from Harlan County to Western after Dad finished his military service to try for a clarinet scholarship. When they got it here to WKU, they were told that all the clarinet scholarships had already been given out. What Western needed at that time were bassoons. A few days later, Daddy and Reed came back with a bassoon, and he got a full scholarship on bassoon. It didn't take long, though, for the music faculty to recognize his great talent on piano, clarinet, sax, jazz improvisation, and composition. After college, our dad went to UK for graduate school, where he met our mom, who was a senior music major, and now that was old for information. It was 63 years ago. Their anniversary was October 5th. He was at a crossroads career-wise, deciding whether to teach or go pro like many of his military buddies with whom he had played while being stationed in California. Some of them were joining professional jazz bands, and some of his buddies joined the Lawrence Welk Show. Mom won his heart, though, and only 3 weeks after they first met, they eloped. Cecil Carrick, another musical legend in Bowling Green, drove my mom and dad to the courthouse, and he was their best man. Mom convinced Daddy to teach so they could work together and raise a family, and we're glad they did. He gave in, and they were the first choir and band directors at Franklin County High School in Frankfort. Again, it was our mother who encouraged our dad to go for a PhD and teach at the university level. She knew him well. To be a high school band director takes a lot of physical energy, and that was not his forte, and pun intended. That's what he would have said. He took Mom's advice, and we moved to Columbus, Ohio, where Daddy pursued his doctorate at Ohio State. Mom immediately landed a teaching job in suburban Columbus and financially supported our family for the next 2 years. Now ready to teach again, finding a university job was not difficult. Dad had several offers but chose WKU hands down. He had enjoyed his undergraduate study here, and he loved Bowling Green. And you know what a difference he made at WKU and surrounding areas from 1965 on. So what was Doc Livingston like at home? He's humble, funny, has simple tastes. He loves family, food, people, dogs, and trains. He loves astronomy. He loves caves. He never cared for TV much, but he loves a good joke. Honestly, though, it is difficult to talk about him without mentioning the music. Most of his friends were and are musicians. Before he retired from WKU, Mom and Daddy bought a big Western cedar home and named it Alpine Lodge. Here they ran a bed and breakfast for 15 years. During this time, he teamed up with his old friend Billy Vaughn, who had moved back to Bowling Green from Los Angeles, and together they made musical magic at a restaurant in Bowling Green called the Branding Iron. My brother Tim played bass with them, and they made several tours to Japan, where big bands were very popular in the 80s. Daddy also had his own band and played many gigs with WKU music faculty Marshall Scott, John Sapola, and others. Today, life is different with our dad with his declining mental state. He has trouble remembering most things, but can still sit down and play music like he was 20 years old. At various times, my daughters have visited him at Chandler Memory Center and have played instruments or sung with him, and it's a connection on a very deep level, beyond words. My brother Tim, my husband Mike, and I also play with him regularly, and though he forgets the names of the tunes, he can follow in any key wherever we go with the music, both on the piano and on his clarinet. He is still truly amazing. David Livingston has always been an optimist. Every day when I would ask him how his day went, he would always say, "I had a good day." And of course it wasn't always good. Our mom had 2 strokes, and they've been through hard times, recently in the hospital and now in separate homes for their specific care needs. Life is very complicated now, but God gives them and us the grace to take one day at a time. 2 or 3 years ago, they would have been able to sit here and enjoy this celebration and understand what it means. But we'll take the DVD Barb has made, and it was wonderful, and we'll show it to them over and over and over. So again, please accept our gratitude for bestowing this great honor on Dr. David Livingston, and please go visit him. He's at Chandler Memory Center, and he'll play you a tune. He has a piano in his room, and it might be the same tune over and over, but he will play, even if you don't ask. Thank you.
Our next recipient is Mr. Rick Loomis, a Pulitzer Prize-winning photojournalist who has spent much of his career embedded with the U.S. Marine Corps in the Middle East. A 1994 graduate, Rick has shared his immense talent with other WKU photojournalism students as a faculty member in the Mountain Workshops in Kentucky, a long-standing WKU photojournalism tradition. He has presented, lectured, and shared his experiences at universities across the nation and is recognized as one of America's top photojournalists. Please direct your attention to the video screen as we honor the extraordinary work of Rick Loomis.
A Pulitzer Prize-winning photojournalist with a genuine compassion for his craft, Rick Loomis has mastered the art of connecting the eye to the heart, where subjects are never objects.
He's very empathetic. I mean, I think to be a great visual journalist, you have to, you got to be tough, and you got to have sometimes a hard veneer, because you see horrible things that really no other people should see, and it's tough to do. But I think he never takes any of that lightly, and he does. He's very empathetic, and he feels what his subjects are going through, and I think there's an emotional bond there that allows him to notice the nuance, and again, at that moment, capture the great picture that really portrays what's going on. When he worked on the 7 billion project, that around the globe, and just some really tough subjects there, but you can see he really treats people with dignity. He treats them with compassion, and it comes through in his photography.
A turtle-loving youngster growing up in the Sunshine State, Loomis's father encouraged his son's curiosity and love of nature and is responsible for buying Rick his first camera. While attending high school in Florida, an internship with the Palm Beach Post cemented Loomis's career choice. After graduation, he worked part-time for the Post while attending community college until being told he needed a real degree from a real school to further his career. That's when the budding photojournalist found his way to Western Kentucky.
When I got to Western and I was away from home, I really had experiences both inside the classroom and outside the classroom that shaped me in ways to become, the person that I am today, more than most things. I mean, it was like my parents and university, and that, and that was it. And it was, not the entire experience. It wasn't all about photography and here's this f-stop and here's this shutter speed and here's how this lens works. It was it was that for sure, but it was also here's how to be a good human being. And I think that's, that was more valuable than anything.
Mentor and former professor David LaBelle remembers the humanity he saw in the young WKU student.
He understands that this business, it's not about him. It's about the people that we're serving. It's about the people's stories that we're telling. And he understands that quite well. And he wants, he cares deeply about people. He's had enough hardship in his life, which I think sometimes is required. He's had enough hardship in his life to understand what it means when he sees people in hardship, whether they're grieving over the loss of somebody or just a difficult situation financially. Wherever they are, he understands it, and I guess that's what compassion is looking at somebody and not only feeling sorry for them and having empathy, but having a desire to want to help them and to want to make their life better.
After earning a Bachelor of Arts degree in photojournalism with a minor in Latin American Studies in 1994, Loomis joined the staff of the Los Angeles Times. His portfolio includes a month covering the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks, accompanying U.S. Marines as they invaded Afghanistan, embedding with U.S. troops in Iraq, later Fallujah, and continuing to monitor the situation in Iraq, documenting conflict as a war photographer. Colleagues credit Loomis's optimism and resourcefulness for getting them through the trials of covering war.
We teased about him When he went to the LA Times, and the first time he went to Iraq, the reporter that worked with him, I think, was a little concerned because he was pretty green. He hadn't been at the Times very long. And when he came back, he said, you know, he would want to go with this guy anywhere in the world. He said, this guy can do anything. He can jump from a plane, he can scuba dive, he can hot wire a Jeep if they needed to do, and he is that kind of a guy. He's a person that truly, that doesn't see obstacles. He sees hurdles. He sees hurdles and he gets over them, but he never sees obstacles.
Rick is also a very skilled mechanic. When we were in Baghdad after the invasion, we stumbled across Uday, who was the son of Saddam, had kept a garage full of luxury cars. And we had no way, we were walking around, we had no way to get around. And we were looking for a way to get around, and there were all these Mercedes and BMWs, and Rick figured out a way to siphon gasoline out of one of the cars that didn't work into one of the ones we thought might work, and he just found a hose, sucked it out, almost made himself sick, put it in there and got gasoline, and we managed to get it started and got a little ways before it died. And then he figured out a way to get a dune buggy, one of Uday's big nice white dune buggy going, got that started by sort of jump starting it, and we drove for a little ways with that, and then it stopped working, and then he convinced some soldiers to let us tie up to the back of one of their Humvees, and we just rode around Baghdad being towed by one of the Humvees and got where we needed to go.
His coverage of war earned him the Robert F. Kennedy Award in 2013 and 2014. He's also received the Hillman Prize for Photojournalism, the Scripps Howard Foundation's National Journalism Award, and the NPPA's Photographer of the Year Award. But it was a series about the world's oceans in decline that earned him a coveted Pulitzer Prize in 2007. LA Times Deputy Managing Editor Colin Crawford remembers having the honor of informing Lewis of his award after finding him in the newspaper's parking garage.
So I go, I'm coming to you. So I go out to the parking garage, and he goes, hey, look what I got. And he's got like a Ferrari or Tesla or something. We've got one of these cars we're looking, reviewing, so we're taking it for a test drive. So he goes, get in. Oh, okay. So we get in, the car's this far off the ground. And he's flying around the streets of LA, and he flips through the 2nd Street Tunnel, which you've ever seen. It's in all these movies, really well lit. And he's going about 100 miles an hour in the 2nd Street Tunnel. And in my head, it suddenly flashes on me. When we die, up until 5 minutes ago, it would have been senior executive at the LA Times perishes in fiery crash. Now it's going to be Pulitzer Prize winner and some other guy perish in fiery crash. Needless to say, I didn't tell him till we were parked.
I really think you just work, and then if something good comes of it, that's great too. And to win a Pulitzer, it's still kind of like shocking to me, I guess, in a way. And it's been 7 years now, I guess, and I kind of still, it's hard to fathom, but it opens doors, I think, in ways. It earns the respect from my peers and my bosses, and I think that's great. I'm sure it's afforded me opportunities that I wouldn't have otherwise had, and I appreciate that.
Loomis continues to cover his passion, the environment, and war, and never misses an opportunity to pay it forward, teaching and lecturing across the country. He serves as a faculty member for the Eddie Adams Workshop and the Mountain Workshops in Kentucky. He's married to fellow Los Angeles Times photojournalist Liz O'Balin.
I feel humbled, and I feel grateful, and I feel honored to be one of his teachers and to be his friend.
I think he's just fascinated by what's out there. You never know what's out there, and I think he lives by the motto that there's something new out there every day. All you have to do is just go out there and find it, and he does.
2014 WKU Hall of Distinguished Alumni inductee, Rick Loomis.
Oh, that was kind of hard to look at. So embarrassing. But if anybody runs out of gas, I can siphon for you, get you some gas. Greetings, WKU family. I'm only standing here right now because many people along the way took the time to care, to nurture, and inspire. A lot of you guys are sitting right there. When I graduated high school, my internship at the Palm Beach Post turned into a part-time job working at the newspaper's photo lab. I was pretty excited to be there, I admit. I started junior college in Florida that same year, thinking I would get a 2-year degree and work my way into a full-time staff job at the Palm Beach Post. To my surprise, when my bosses caught wind of this idea, they promptly set a date to fire me. The reason, they says, that they didn't want anyone sneaking in the back door. If I wanted to be a legitimate photojournalist, I needed to go to a, quote, real school with a real photojournalism program. I didn't necessarily agree with them at the time, but without much choice, I deferred to my bosses and set out to find the right school. A road trip from Florida to Kentucky in 1988, sorry, God, I'm older than I thought I was, brought me here to see if Western fit the bill. From the moment I first stepped foot on campus, I realized that I had not only found the university that I wanted to attend, but I'd also found a family. This rings so true today as I gratefully receive this honor, not just in the presence of my mother, my wife, and her family, but also in the presence of my mentors, who directly shaped my career. There's Mike Morse, who built the photojournalism program from scratch right here at Western, and Dave LaBelle, who taught me more than just how to shoot a good picture, but how to be a good human. And to Jack Korn, who said in a phone call to editors at the Los Angeles Times looking to make a hire, I'll try to do your accent, well, you can't go wrong with Loomis. He's a hard worker. And with his utterance of those words, I landed my first and only job as a photojournalist. There are others here too, and without you, I certainly wouldn't have made the journey I've made. I stand here humbled by this year's other honorees, Colonel Mickey Riggs and Doc Livingston, as well as the list of prestigious and influential people who've already been inducted into the Hall of Distinguished Alumni. When Dr. Ransell first told me that I was to be inducted, I read about Mickey and Doc and thought there must be some mistake. I mean, I don't even have a nickname. Well, I did have a couple of nicknames in college, but I'm not going to repeat them here on stage. When I look back to my time here as a student, I couldn't ask for a better experience. Tuition was $900 a semester, and that was out of state. My rent, of course, paid to Mr. A, somewhere out there, I saw you, was $117.50 a month. That bought me half of a one-bedroom apartment that I shared with Chuck Wing, another photo student. That house, by the way, has since been flattened into a campus parking lot. Chuck and I did a lot of growing up during our time here, and I cherish all the memories that I've made and the lifelong friends that I've also made. Western Kentucky University helped establish my core values, and I'm extremely proud of my roots here. Bedrock journalistic traits like ethics, reliability, and trustworthiness all came from here. In newspaper photojournalism, everything I do has my name printed right underneath it. But it's not just my reputation that's on the line each time my name is printed, but that of my newspaper and also this university. So every day when I wake up to do my job, I try to honor not just where I work, but also where I came from, this place. So once I became established in the field, I came right back here, returning to the university to lecture, but also to coach the Mountain Workshop, where each year the future journalists that will soon represent WKU out in the field come to hone their craft before venturing out into their careers. I use my vacation time to help teach the workshop because I want Western students to leave this university with our tradition of excellence pumping through their veins. This tradition of excellence I'm talking about is why you find the legion of hilltoppers around the country holding down the top positions in this field. I have the utmost respect for this university and for its passionate, dedicated educators. And I hope that one day, when Liz and I have children, they would choose to pursue their education here as well. Again, I'm humbled by the accolades. I salute my fellow inductees and will work every day to honor this distinction that has been bestowed upon me. And I'd be remiss not to thank Tracy, Barbara, and Cheryl for all their help and everybody else who helped put this on. The presentations are amazing. Go Big Red. Thank you, guys.
You know, there's a little bit of a theme going on here with faculty mentors and people who have helped to make these terrific individuals so successful. And I see it in the music department, I see it in our photojournalism program, and I know I see it in the ROTC program. And and you'll hear more about in just a moment. By the way, James Kinney, who's head of the photojournalism department, how many Pulitzer Prizes have our alumni won over the years? 24? Yeah, so think about that and put it in the context of American higher education. Our final inductee today is retired Colonel Gary. I never heard the Gary part before. All I knew was Mickey. Gary Mickey Riggs, a decorated Army veteran and former commander of the WKU ROTC program. Mickey Riggs played football for beloved coach Jimmy Fikes. He earned 2 degrees from WKU, a bachelor's degree in 1958 and a master's degree in 1974. Colonel Riggs is credited with saving a faltering WKU ROTC program that under his leadership grew from 63 to 432 top quality cadets and was recognized as a top 4 ROTC program in America. That program remains strong today, and it's one of the programs of which I am very proud. We have a couple hundred great cadets. We commission 40 or 50 every year that go into the Army as second lieutenants, and I know our nation is strong because of what we're helping to produce on this campus through a program that you helped strengthen, Mickey. We're grateful for your legacy. Now please direct your attention to the screen as we honor the military service and life contributions of our very own Hilltopper hero, Colonel Mickey Riggs.
A decorated military veteran, former commander of the WKU ROTC program, athlete and soldier. Colonel Gary Mickey Riggs' professional persona belies a true family man whose success he attributes to the strength and support of his family, his team.
We have a thing in coaching football, kind of what we've lived on for our entire career. It's called the team, the team, the team. And it's not always the football team that you coach. It's the team that you associate yourself, family, friends. And I don't know of a greater team than Margaret and Mickey Riggs. If you walk into their house, you see their legacy. And their legacy is family. Their legacy is friends. Their legacy is country. Their legacy is Western Kentucky University.
Growing up in Virginia, the athletically talented Riggs played track and football as an All-American. He married his high school sweetheart Margaret and headed to North Carolina to play ball. The financial responsibility of a family with a baby on the way forced a move to Bowling Green and WKU to play football, work, earn an education, and along the way, experience the support of a university family. Colonel Riggs fondly remembers how WKU officials made it possible for him to attend his stepfather's funeral.
And when he died, I was in school here, and I didn't have a red cent other than what Margaret made. And I think they give us $15 a month on a scholarship for your laundry and stuff. And our president and Georgia Bates, his secretary, called me up to the office. I had no clue. We didn't have a telephone. Dorms didn't have telephones in those days. And told me what had happened. And she had tickets, train tickets for us. And Kelly, Dr. Thompson, I don't know, they give us $200 so we could come home to my stepdad's funeral. And that impacts you.
Riggs completed a Bachelor of Science degree in English in 1958. He joined the Army in 1960 as a member of the elite Green Berets, now known as Special Forces, completing 4 combat tours in Vietnam and Laos. Retired Colonel John D. Wagelstein met Riggs in basic training as second lieutenants at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, where they came nose to nose fighting over responsibility for lost compasses. From that point forward, the two shared a handful of duty tours and remained cherished friends. He lauds the humility, loyalty, and command Riggs displayed in all of his missions, recounting one operation in particular in Puerto Rico during unrest in Panama.
It's a big operation. Well, Mickey is running back in Panama, and he's coordinating all the teams that are going to come up and meet these requirements that the Puerto Ricans and the people in the Virgin Islands have asked for. And so he ran this thing and put teams on airplanes and put them in and got all these missions done in about, we were up there for about 2 months. So I mean, when you know he's back there pushing the teams out, getting them prepared and putting them on planes and making sure they know where they're going, you don't worry about it. You know, like one of my friends said about Mick, he says, if he's on your flank, you don't worry about that flank. You just know you can set your watch by him or take it to the bank.
Riggs and his growing family returned to Bowling Green, where he completed a master's degree in education in 1974. Now, at the end of the Vietnam War and with a divided country, former WKU President Dr. Dero Downing was faced with losing the school's ROTC program. He reached out to then Major Riggs for help. Without hesitation, Riggs accepted the challenge, cleaned house by enlisting the aid of some of his former colleagues in Special Forces, and it was mission complete.
Made a plan, and we followed it, and we wound up 3 years later with from 63 kids to about 420, 30. We were the top program in our region. There's 4 regions. So we had a great time here on the Hill.
I bet you could take 10, 20, 30 names of men who were in the ROTC program who went on to serve significant role in our armed forces that were brought into the program because of Mickey and his tremendous love for country, tremendous love for serving our country, and that name would read like a who's list.
And when I see those young men and women and see what they've accomplished and the awards they win, the scholarships that they get, and to know that they're going out to serve our country for me, and I think we would have been so wrong to have done away with a department that is so important still today.
A distinguished career with the Army continued after his tour with WKU ROTC, commanding the 3rd Brigade, 2nd ROTC region at Fort Knox, and later the Fort McCall training facility at Fort Bragg, where all special forces are trained. He also commanded forces in Panama and Venezuela, where he led a number of classified clandestine operations in foreign countries.
It was a challenge. It was a little, in those days, a lot off the beaten path. And it was not career enhancing. If you were an infantry officer, a regular Army officer, and you went in Special Forces, you were expected to maybe pull one tour and then go back to the, quote, real Army. And neither Mickey or I did that. Because we decided to go to the sound, literally to the sound of the guns, what was much more fun anyway.
Riggs and his late wife, Margaret, kept their commitment to retire to Bowling Green, where the couple remained staunch supporters of WKU and its athletic programs, and where once again Colonel Riggs played a key role in saving the university program.
And then in 1992, we were faced with the crisis of football being lost here at Western Kentucky. We were told that afternoon, a Friday afternoon in April, end of March, early April, that football was gone. Crushed, had no idea it was coming. So we tried to call the 3 amigos, Jimmy Fikes, Butch Gilbert, and we found them at Mickey Riggs' house on a Friday evening and told them what had happened. And they dug their heels into the ground. And this was not going to happen on their watch. And 1 month later, we picked up 1 vote and kept football.
Colonel Riggs' decorations include multiple Purple Hearts for combat wounds, the Legion of Merit, Meritorious Service Medals, and a number of domestic and foreign awards for bravery and service. With all of his accolades, awards, and honors, Colonel Riggs remains proudest of his family. He and his wife of 59 years, 11 months, and 18 days raised 3 boys and have 5 grandchildren.
I mean, they were linked. I mean, they were totally linked in spirit. And they were linked in family, as they say. They were linked in friends, and they were linked in country. Western Kentucky University. I mean, they were linked in life.
2014 WKU Hall of Distinguished Alumni inductee, Colonel Gary Mickey Riggs.
Well, I tell you, I feel very honored today. I just did my job, but I love Western. My wife and I grew up here. My oldest son, Gary Jr., and my other two boys, their mom and I told them they could go to any school that we could afford to send them, as long as it was in Bowling Green, Kentucky. I'm proud of my kids. They all attended this school, and they all did a great job. My youngest, or my oldest rather, Gary Jr. is a doctor. My youngest son, Michael, is a chef with a doctorate degree. And my second son, who was his mama's baby, is a graduate. We came to everything we could here through the years. And Dr. Downing and his gang are partly responsible for my love for this place. My kids grew up here and all over the world, actually. We went to a lot of assignments. I left here and went to Ranger, Airborne, all the good things you needed to be in Special Forces. Spent 27 years with them. We served in Latin America, Middle America, Africa, England. And she was the boss. I found that out about 15 minutes after we got married. And my dad died here, my stepdad, great guy, Jewish, loved us to death and took care of us when we were kids. My guy that I worked for in the summertime at the YMCA beach in Virginia, his brother was a line coach here. He said, you can go there and get a good education, or maybe better than you could at Duke, where I was at. And I had to do that because when you got a little one and you're 19 years old, your most important thing in your life is your kid and your wife. So I came out here and they offered me a scholarship. I'd been an All-American freshman at Duke University. But I fell in love with this place, big time. It's Georgia Bates and President Kelly Thompson. Some of you all remember that group. They got us a place to live in Vet Village in a trailer. That was my part of the scholarship system. That was instead of a room up in the halls where the teams lived. They got my wife a job at Holly, and I got to sweep out the dorm every day for Coach Diddle. And then inspected, he said, that's pretty good, Riggs, but you got to do better. But the 3 years that we were here were the best times of our life. We met a lot of people, played ball for Nick Dennis, great coach here. Ran track too, so. My greatest game in my life was against Murray, Dear old Murray, Mr. Diddle called him. He hated him. I don't know why. He would come down and talk to us, and he'd look in my eyes and say, Riggs, you better do good, or I'll cut you out of my will. So my senior year here, he'd give us the same thing, and I had my greatest game against Murray. 4 touchdowns and 1 call back, and Mr. Diddle was on the bench. He's a basketball hero, but he just, because it was dear old Murray, and if there's any Murray people out here, hey, I didn't hate Murray, I despised him. And I went into Army ROTC because it paid $21.75 a month, which paid the milk bill for my oldest boy, Sonny. And I told my guys that their mama and I would send them to any college they wanted to go to, as long as it was in Bowling Green, Kentucky. So they all went, all continue to be loyal to it. After my graduation in 1958, we went to Fort Bragg, went through Ranger and all the good stuff you had to do, and went to a group of tryouts for the special operations guys. 50 of them officers, they had them separated in those days. 3 of us made it. And I was proud of that. Stayed in Special Forces for 27 years, all over the world. 7th group at Fort Bragg, which is my mother group. 8th in Panama. 1st on Okinawa, and 5th in Nam, Vietnam, during my time. I spent time in Laos, Cambodia, North Vietnam, in the Canal Zone. My very best friend in the world, John David Wagglestein, retired as I did with a colonel rank, is here today. And we went on a lot of missions that nobody wants to talk about. We were ready to go into Cuba when our airplanes went down in there. And President Kennedy said, no, don't go, because they said if you go, the intelligence guys that picked up the intercepts from Castro, they were going to shoot our guys. That's the way war is. Some of you have served, so you know that bad guys don't mess around with you. And we were in submarines ready to land and called us back. Many years later, after a lot of missions together with Wagglestein, and a dear friend who's gone now, Scotty, we got together again in Bolivia. He was in the combat unit. I was in the headquarters. And we got Che Guevara. Worked hard, got transferred back to the Canal Zone, commanded a group there. I was a major. Majors didn't command groups, but I got it. And I worked out of division headquarters in Santa Cruz, Bolivia. My family was with me. I took them. I'd been in Vietnam for 15 years almost. And on this tour, I was gone for 14 months. And my boss lady said, "Hey, Riggs, we're going with you." So she did. My boys went to a military State Department school. There were other oil people there, and they were blowing up our rigs and whatever, our oil rigs. My kids are all here, Sonny, Mike, and my boy Tim. They're all graduates of Western Kentucky because that's where we taught. As I said, we said you can go to any school as long as it's in Bowling Green. And they did that. And I'm proud of them. We've got 5 grandkids, 1 grandgirl, 1 girl. She's beautiful. And she married a great guy. And if you all don't mind, I'd like for my guys to stand up so you can see them with their wives. You got to stand up, Mike, Liz. When I came back to get a master's program, the Army sent me, and you could go in those years to your alma mater. So we came here. We had 62 cadets. You heard it on the screen. And left here with over 400. We produced 5 generals out of that group. I went with my dear friend Jim Fikes on his recruiting trips. He didn't have the gas money, so he said, "You go with me and you recruit for your system and I'll get my football players." And we did that. Our program, when I came here as a professor of military science, had a bunch of golf players, and they weren't doing it. Had 63 kids. We're going to take it away from Western. DA, Department of Army, said, "Hey, we can't afford that cadre down there, and we're going to come under, guess who? Eastern, Mr. Diddle's hated enemy." And when I left, my guys, I went to Bragg and got a lot of SF guys that were professionals, and I had worked with them and had them on my teams, and they worked hard. We had great support from Dr. Downing and the deans. And Paul Cook, I don't know, Paul, if you're here today, but he kept me out of a lot of trouble because I didn't do things quite according to the law of the Army. But we got the people here. And my first general is a dear friend, Joe Smith. Where are you, Joe? Stand up and wave. Stand up. Back there. He always tried to stay in the background, but he was a general officer and our first one. And we produced about 7 out of that class, some other classes. Western had the #1 program in the ROTC world in our region, and there are 4 regions in the U.S. But it was because of my guys that I brought from Bragg, trained them hard. We had the first girls that went into the Army as officers. And they were some of my guys' girlfriends, wives, whatever. They were known as the rebelettes in those days, and they worked for the president as hostesses. And they all were on scholarship. We had super support from Dr. Downing and Paul Cook. And I've never forgotten those people. They made life good. Joe just stood up for you. He was my first general. I call them my generals because they came out of our program. We got 6 of those guys. And some of them are major generals, got a lieutenant general. That's big stuff for one little school. We were not that great in numbers, but we had quality because I beat them to death if they didn't do what they were supposed to do. And they didn't want to hear my mouth. They did it, and they survived and were good. I left Western, returned to Bragg, took over the Special Forces Training Command there. I was a light colonel, but it was a full bull's job. And I was asked to serve in Venezuela by the Minister of Defense. And after 2 years in that job, I was prepared to stay another year, but my boss lady said, "Hey, buddy boy, my oldest son's going to have a baby boy. I know he's going to be a boy." I said, "How do you know?" She said, "I just know. Mamas know every daggum thing." And we came back, came home, and my daughter-in-law sent us a sonogram. Margaret Ann knew about sonograms. I didn't know much about them, but it shows you, well, you mamas know what they are. And we read that thing, it was going to be a boy. They wanted to send me back into South America. In my day, they had FAILs, foreign area officers, and you had to speak the language. I speak Spanish and some dialects of Spanish the Argentinians liked, and the Brazilians. They weren't quite Spanish. They were, I called it Spanglish. Not a lot of English in it. And when that tour was over, I asked my boss to return me to Kentucky. So he did. He did that as a favor more than anything. But we came back to 2nd Region, which was the region that Western Kentucky's in. And we did a good job. As I said, Joe was our first general officer. And I did a lot of stuff with Coach Fikes, my dear friend. My boys were still at home. They attended Bowling Green High. My grandboy, I'm proud to say, is on 3 state championships. How I got a big center in there, I don't know, because all the rest of those guys were running backs. But he, I think he got my grandpa's genes. He was big man, 6'4", 200 or 310 pounds, I think was his weight. So Parker Man Riggs, he's in college now, and he's doing the same thing as a center. We built our retirement home here in Bowling Green. I lost my wife almost 3 years ago. It's hard. She was my boss, and she kept me organized because I had a little bit of a temper, and I had impatience when my guys didn't do what I told them. But she'd always take care of that by making me sleep on the couch or something. I have a lot of dear friends here in Bowling Green. I have a doctor who's taken care of my Agent Orange for a long time. And I love him to death. I continue to cherish this university on the hilltop and those who gave me and mine the best years of our lives. Thank you, WKU, and God bless this university and the people who love her.